Good evening and welcome to the Medicine Man podcast. Uh, Deep Bhandari is with me today, and we're going to discuss a few things about the survey that we have posted online. So, Deep, thank you very much for designing the survey. The initial feedback has been excellent, and so has been the response. And I just wanted to start by asking you with what made you to come up with this survey?
Good evening, Anoop, and good evening, viewers. I think this is a great opportunity and wonderful question to start with. The purpose. And what really that set me thinking that what triggered this research is not so simple. But then if I go back, maybe the last decade, and if you are a somebody that who's observing pharmaceutical or Indian pharmaceutical industry more keenly, you'll find that industry has invested enormous resources in, I think that majority of areas like marketing, brand strategies, even that to a larger extent, the digital transformation, market analytics, patient programs, and various other initiatives. Yet, surprisingly, I think that very little structured research has been conducted on the medical representative or the sales force itself. I don't see many efforts to understand uh, you know I think world over we still say that the rep or face to face call is the gold standard. In spite of all the digital transformation, that position hasn't shifted. Yet we find that there's not much of effort has gone into this area to understand the challenges the medical rep or the sales force they face.
Okay.
Right. In India, that most of the companies, there's it's still evident that they depend upon the large sales force to drive engagement with over almost 12 lakhs or 15 lakhs doctors across the country. Uh, the environment in which the reps operate has changed dramatically. I think that's the only expression I have, right? Uh, Doctors are getting more and more busier than ever. They're seeing more patients. Uh, More importantly, the therapies are becoming more complex. When I started few decades back, most of the molecules used to be very simple and things like that. But now that therapies are more complex, compliance expectations, regulatory, the marketing compliance are rising. At the same time, we see the several recurring challenges across the companies. I think that the industry have been fighting the very high attrition rates last last decade. I don't think that any company has able to manage that, which is an indication that there's a big challenge there. Increasing pressure on the targets and the coverage and things like that we often hear the very frustrated salespeople. Um, but more specifically, if you ask me, I think that we have deteriorated when you look at that the scientific development, which also leads to many times that frustration because of the career stagnation concerns about the amongst the sales team.
Great. So you're telling me to say in our typical medical terms that a big prescription is being written without any diagnosis being made. Am I right in saying that? So this survey is in a way an effort by you to do a deep diagnosis of what really ails the medical rep and the entire field force.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So what I was about to say that uh, uh, possibly that you put the words into my mouth is that despite of these challenges, we have rarely paused as an industry and reflected to ask that how prepared are our reps for the future? What skills do they believe they need, and how do they see their careers are evolving? Now, what's important is that I think that anybody can answer these three questions, but we do not have something that which is more database research to give really clarity that among a very diverse kind of stakeholders in the pharma industry to drive or start this meaningful conversation about how do we build the future ready sales force.
Great. So it is like one looks at it and says the patient is not too happy with the doctor because the doctor doesn't have enough time to hear him out. And I think in the case of a medical rep, uh, most of the meetings that the head office has with them is a one directional one where they are given top down instructions rather than getting to know their challenges and more importantly even getting to know them. So uh, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the key areas you're exploring in this survey?
Wonderful question again, Anup. And based off our understanding and a very systematic, that reflection on the pharmaceutical industry, we designed this, the entire research or survey to explore the five critical dimensions that define the future of medical rep profession when you look at that. And obviously that we start looking at the capability gap. I think that which is again that very frustrating, as you see that I can give through more and more data that how systematically that many of the companies we used to really pride ourselves that they invest heavily into building capabilities. They have systematically that reduced their training teams and efforts considerably. I don't have to name. I think that everyone knows that what has happened to that. So capability gap. So we are trying to understand that how confident reps feel about discussing areas, very simple areas like mechanism of action, but also that very meaningful areas, more that when you use the clinical trials endpoints, right, comparative efficacy, safety signals, right. So as the therapies have become more advanced, the ability to interpret the evidence becomes increasingly important. So how you are building that capability so the rep is able to meaningful engage with the doctors. Then we are looking at that the market reality versus preparedness. Now we have seen that, I think that I have been speaking about it, the industry is witnessing a rapid scientific innovation, especially in the areas like oncology or immunology, diabetes or obesity, biologics in particular. Right. So surveys seek to understand that whether the Salesforce feel adequately prepared to engage in these conversations. Third point is, of course, the career aspiration and the engagement. Very important area that how the reps view their career trajectories. And many aspire to work in a specialty division or multinational companies, but the pathway and the role of these is not always very clear, or how do you really look at that? Fourth area is, initial question that I spoke about the attrition and the engagement drivers. So many pharmaceutical companies in India, the rep attrition range average or lower area about 20%, which I think that many consider healthy, to as high as 47% annually. So
That's
you
terrible.
can see
Yeah.
that fifth to half of the sales force is replacing every year. So, what are the understanding of underlying drivers, and whether they relate to the work pressure, career clarity, capability development is important in building some sustainable Salesforce initiative. Finally, I think that what we would like to see that from this survey, that how do we benchmark superstar reps capability? So the research attempt to define that what is the difference between an average rep uh, from a high performing future ready rep, using a framework which I think that you are an author of the book, and then we picked up that cash, which
Yeah.
is if we expand that knowledge, attitude, skills, and importantly habits.
Great. So, you brought in a very important point about attrition, 20% to 47%. And if this is an ongoing, and then I can say that, at the end of a year, every year, you're having a completely new field force. And where does the relationship building with the customer come in? If a person is not there in the field for at least 2 to 3 years, like it was in our days, I think the question of building relationship with the doctors, chemists, and distributors is simply not there. So all this leads to a lot of inefficiencies, and what can I say? There's a lot of disconnect that is happening between the strategy formulation, strategy execution, and therefore one really does not know what one is doing. But as long as the sales are happening, I think people are happy with that. But as you have seen from the both the IQVIA and the Pharma track reports, the growth is largely coming from not in increase in units of drugs sold, but in the price increases that they are making. So I think this again points out to the inefficiency that is already there in the field force. So yes, as you rightly said, we need to dig in deeper to understand really what is the capability gap, what is the challenges in the market, and how the pharma industry needs to equip the medical reps. So that's a great way of understanding the problem before we begin to address it. Deep, you have been in the industry, I think, for close to 4 decades, beginning as a medical rep yourself. And I think there have been several inflection points in the pharma industry. And I remember back in the 80s or even 90s, the stretch from Worli to, Prabhadevi used to be dotted with the MNCs. And all those, I would say that was a huge inflection point when these companies sort of exited the Indian market, or they got merged and disappeared. So, in that way, what, in your opinion, are the main inflection points that you have seen in the last 4 decades? And how, more importantly, how has this impacted the medical rep and the field force?
Wonderful question. Very, very, I think the intuitive or insightful question. Really, one need to think deeply about, how we are seeing the role of medical rep is evolving significantly in past 2 decades. And this is due to several important inflection point, as you said that. I think that primarily that the environment is changing, and I think that scientific innovation or explosion of scientific innovation remain very important inflection point. Last decade, that if you move from India to global, and if you're studying that, you will notice that the global, there's hardly anything called mass market today. Everything is focused on, every research is focused on biologics, complex molecules, rare disease or orphan disease and things like that. And partly because that uh, they have a flexibility to that the prices they can charge, which is on value based, because these drugs have capability of saving human lives or making a significant quality difference to the human lives and things like that. India is not immune. I think that it's slowly seeping in. So one of the reasons that, or an inflection point, is that remarkable advances in therapies, particularly in oncology, immunology, metabolic diseases, and things like that. These therapies require much deeper understanding of clinical evidence. For example, if today that you look at the discussion around the targeted oncology therapy or GLP-1 based metabolic treatments require familiarity with the clinical trial data and the patient selection criteria, patient personas or profile and things like that. So this has become, increased expectation from reps should be able to interpret the scientific science, not just communicate the brand messages. Now, look at this. This is one side that you have, that all the efforts from the pharmaceutical is kind of reducing, and the expectation from the doctors are improving. On the other hand, that second point, that if you look at that, the time constraint, the doctors are busy, they're seeing more patients. This means the rep may get that, I would say, less than a minute, few seconds to communicate effectively. As a result, the doctors increasingly value relevant insights over what we say repeated detailing. My brand, my product, available frequently, quality, or lowest price, and all those things, which is what the 90% or 95% of the reps talk about, which is not relevant to the doctor. Third point, I think that, you have kind of been very vocal about it in your events also. And otherwise in Medicine Man Forum is a compliance and ethical regulatory scrutiny. So with the increasing, the regulatory scrutiny and evolving industry, especially the marketing practices code, companies are moving towards more ethical or evidence-based promotion. And this reduces the reliance on traditional promotional tactics, which also increases the credibility of scientific engagement. Now, if you look at all those things, now these were earlier that come as a rescue for competencies, right? So you have those gimmicks and then giveaways, or a lot of other things that which you can do in order to engage the doctors. And today, increasingly, those things or reliances on those practices are reducing, and hence that you see that's a major inflection point. Third, and I think that again that you have been very vocal about the digital transformation. Now, digital tools have added a very new dimension to the HCP's engagement. Today, what we see is that certainly that rep remains, or face-to-face call remains, the gold standard. So rather than replacing the Salesforce or reps, digital channels have made the role of more hybrid and more strategic, in a way that I think that in global pharma today, that if I see those hybrid reps or the hybrid capability of reps become very, very important. So their role becomes much larger and much important to the company. So that's where that I see the future of reps will need to communicate both, as you say, that human relationship skills with the digital fluency. which is very important. So as I see, I think that these are some of these things I see that are very important in when we look at as you said that the major inflection point as far as reps are concerned.
Great. So, on one hand, you are saying that the therapies are getting more complex, and you can correct me, maybe I would be right in saying that many of the drugs that are available today in the market were not in the textbooks of medical doctors when they passed out or even when they did their post graduation and so on. So, on one hand, there is a great need for them to get this information, while the digital definitely makes it available, but I think the rep being an interface has got an important role in finding out which doctor needs which kind of information. And that brings me to the origin of medical reps. Uh, it is said that Roche first arrived in Japan in 1904, and they just sent their drugs to Japan, and there were poor sales to the trading companies. So Roche decided to begin direct sales and sent Rudolf Ebeling, a surgeon, to Japan. And Dr. Ebeling, in return, employed Shohei Ninomiya, a pharmacist who was trained in medicine and fluent in German. And he became the first forerunner of what we now call as a medical rep. And that's a very interesting point because this was back in 1912. So we have a 100-year-old model that is trying to withstand all the major inflection points and still trying to be meaningful. And no wonder it is not being accepted by the doctors, not being accepted by the trade, and the reps themselves, as you rightly said, cannot see a way forward. For example, you and I both started as medical reps, but within 5 years, I think we were clear about the career paths that would be opening up to us, and that sadly is not the case today. So these are definitely big issues, and I think we should get some important insights from the survey. Anyway, before we go into the results that will come in due course, based on your experience, what do you think are the necessary changes that pharma companies need to make the role of medical rep more meaningful?
Very interesting question again. Let me just share one experience with you that so sometime back that I was heading a business, a specialty business called multiple sclerosis, and I had fortunate enough to work with the phenomenal people in the field. And one of the incidents that I remember, and it's a great incident that when you look at that, what you require in today's medical rep, the qualities that what you require. So this was one of the top shot doctors in Chandigarh. So he used to treat our rep like any other rep and things, never used to listen or give time and things like that, which is very unusual. So one day this guy that contested him and said that, look, I've been coming here for 6 months and then whatever that I'm trying to provide, but then unfortunately that you never gave me time. Is there anything? So he said that, look, I have a patient for MS patient. Maybe that next time when you come, I'll discuss that with you. Is that fair enough? So the next week that this guy visited him again, and then he showed that MRI on the screen. Said that this is the patient that I'm going to put on your drug. But this drug cost about 45,000 a month treatment, and which is lifelong. So you can understand the value of a prescription, right? So this rep casually that look at that MRI and he just very politely and respectfully tell doc, why don't you call so and so? He's the head of radiologist department. So he looked surprised and said that, why do you say so? Is it that it's always better that in such cases that have a second opinion before you, that finally that confirm your diagnosis? So he just intercom the radiologist, and then in few moments that this guy came and he showed that. And the radiologist said, sir, this seems to be NMO patient, not MS patient. And he explained that the size of the lesion and distance of the lesion and things like that, and that's the reason that why it is more likely to be NMO patient than MS patient and things like that. Now you see that is ethics. This guy is losing prescription, which is worth few lakhs. First patient, but what is earning is a lifelong respect from that doctor, right? That's the ethical standard, and that's also the capability that is required that to engage meaningfully, right?
Yeah.
I'll just go back to your analysis that 1912 when you talk about. Now, biologics or the rare disease, the doctors are on the same plank today because every patient behaves differently. It's not like mass market and things like that.
Yeah.
Right. Even the mass market, when you look at that, I think that the challenges are very different than what it is. And that is what that the doctors are today, they look for the relevance in medical rep. Unfortunately, what they get is my drug, the product related, not the patient centric, not even that the doctor centric things, right? So they don't see that any relevance, and hence that they don't really believe that they should be spending time with the rep, and continuously that those things are they are kind of cutting down that part. So coming back to your questions, what are the changes? Possibly that I think the capability development becomes is a center point. That how do you really meaningfully engage in a a kind of consultative engagement with the doctors, builds credibility and confidence and things like that. Also that I think for reps it's very important to have a clarity about the career pathways. How they feel certain about the progress into whether they get into a specialty portfolio or strategic account or leadership position if they are interested, or any other allied area. There are so many other career transition points are there. Unfortunately, the industry has been not very transparent about the career pathways that significantly improve the motivation and the retention of the sales force.
Great. So, yeah.
This is kind of little long answer to your question.
I think, yeah, the capability building is at the crux of all the issue. And if one is having an attrition of 20% also, I think no meaningful capability building can take place. So your point is right on spot, where you need to tell the reps clearly what is their career path. I think, they need to have what's in it for me clearly defined in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years. Otherwise, I think they are no better than the gig workers who are working for, whether Zomato or Tomato or whatever they are. I mean, they have their motorbikes, they have their clearly defined duties, they earn their incentives based on the deliveries that they make, but there is no meaningful. It's just a short-term, arrangement that they are having while they are doing something else, and I think pharma cannot afford to do that. So my final question to you, Deep, is that if you were a selector for medical reps, what are those five critical qualifications and qualities that makes medical reps effective? Are there anything intrinsic in them? I mean, everybody pass 50 people pass out of a B Pharma class, say for example. Are all 50 of them having the qualities and that require to grow as a medical rep, or some are better off going into the manufacturing? And so there is a lot of misfitting, I think, that because there is such a demand for, because the high attrition rate, that you take on anybody on board. But in your experience, both working in different function, also in training and development on a global scale, what are those qualities that which give a better success rate as a medical rep?
I think that the cornerstone, if I look at, five I fix on that, then in today's environment, uh, the most important is scientific understanding, which means that a very strong grasp of the science behind the therapies that enables a meaningful conversation with the customer, the doctors. Second is that is staying curious and continuous learning. How do you really? Because the healthcare is not a static thing. Every day the new developments are happening. So uh, the environment, that how do you look at beyond your company, beyond your portfolio, beyond your competition, that how do you look at that healthcare knowledge? Um, and that I think that most of people, you are a brightest example that starting with your career with a fast moving consumer product and getting into a very specific oncology, and how do you learn, right? And now possibly that last 10 12 years that have been spreading that knowledge, and which goes beyond these things. So that very when we talk about that, the look around you, so
Yeah.
how do you continuously update themselves? Um, Third, it's very important that your ability to communicate clearly, ability to simplify complex scientific concepts
Mm.
will always remain a key differentiator.
Yeah.
Fourth point may be what we call is a uh, little um, uh, debatable, but I see a deterioration taking place, is what we call is a professional attitude, which means that working with integrity, reliability, respect for the doctor's time, and how do you focus on building a long-term credibility rather than selling
Mm.
your product
Mm.
anyhow, come what may, that sell your product, right? uh, Finally, I think that discipline, uh, that how do you consistently, that learn skills, prepare before the call. This requires a solid discipline. Understand the patient profile, anticipate the question, review the previous discussion. We say the call note, create a call continuity and things like that. Uh, Make the interaction kind of far more relevant or meaningful for the doctors. This seems little out of the place, but to my mind is I see very few people focus or pay attention to the discipline. And to my
Absolutely.
mind is that discipline is very important.
Okay. Yes, I think.
Today,
Yeah.
today,
Yeah. Yeah. Go
today,
ahead.
me, just give me a 5 more second. Today, that rep's role is becoming more important, more bigger, and more meaningful. And it's not going anywhere. Like that many discussion we say that the medical reps.
Yeah.
My mind is the medical rep role is getting bigger, more important, and more interesting. Really, really, very interesting role, that the meaningful role. And that's what that I think that the industry is missing. And that's what that we would like to understand from the stakeholders, the sales force, the managers, the sales managers, the marketeers, the leaders in the pharmaceutical industry, that what they think about that. And that's how that this survey, so we would be very, very happy that if more and more people participate, more and more people interact, and then provide their really meaningful insight to help us understand that, from the research perspective.
Great. That's a wonderful discussion. I think in 30 minutes we have covered quite a lot of ground. And you are saying that the role of a medical rep is getting more important. I certainly tend to agree with you, because when you see the complexity of even the newer drugs, like the tirzepatide now, which has become a $1 trillion valuation, I think the first time in the history of pharmaceutical industry we have a company with a $1 trillion valuation, which has never happened before. So the opportunities are definitely huge. Especially with the orphan drugs and all that being priced above. But they would require, as you rightly said, somebody with good scientific knowledge, somebody who would like to learn all the time, and curiosity. I was just curious. I saw a report recently that levamisole has been banned by the European regulator, and it is still available in India. And I remember in my days back in the 80s promoting levamisole, and it took on its own life as an immunomodulator and whatnot. But it has been banned, and having this curiosity as to why these drugs have been banned, and often these can be the door openers for medical reps, because doctors may not have the time to look at the newspapers as to what the regulator is doing all over the world, and having this scientific mindset is very important, and more important, as you said, discipline. But I think I would say that the most important is that if you look at the last 40 years, the doctor has not changed much in terms of his attire and approach. He still dresses up, grooms himself very nicely, or maybe even better because of the corporate environment. But when I look at the rep, it's a shocking fall in standards. Whether it is their lack of grooming skills, from the hair cutting to the shaving to no ties, and that backpack has made things easy for them, but it is such a shabby thing to be carrying into the clinic. I think there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done, and I think this survey should answer a lot of questions. Thank you very much, Deep. I think we should have a more extensive discussion on this, maybe getting Salil on board, because I think when he connects the digital thread to all this, I think it will make one more part of the rep skill part which needs to be developed, or the capability part, as to how he has to be not just digitally savvy, but how does he use AI now? Because you said about every patient responds differently to biologics, and therefore I think he needs to have that ability to use the tools and maybe get back to head office and ask them, am I right? And all this can be done with the instant messenger. So, the scope is advanced. Thank you that you have said that the role is getting important. It's not going anywhere. That should be of assurance to our medical rep colleagues. But I think the challenge remains that, are you going to be that rep who is knowledgeable, who has got the right attitude, who is very skilled, and who is disciplined in terms of his habits, or someone who is there just whiling away his time? So I think these are the two major options that are there before the young people. So thank you very much, Deep.
Thank you very much, Anup. Truly enjoy this very interesting conversation, and all the best to you. And let's see that I hope that more and more people from the industry, the stakeholders, or various stakeholders would participate, so we can have a very diverse and very interesting perspective into this research work. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.